We're about to take a short trip into the past, a remarkable glimpse of a footnote to history we first broadcast last April. It's a film made more than 100 years ago on Market Street, San Francisco's main thoroughfare. In fascinating detail, it shows how people lived and dressed in what was then, as now, the Golden City of the American West. The film is well known to historians, but who made it and why, and most importantly, exactly when? For a century, time, like the fog that blankets San Francisco, has shrouded the answers. But now we know. The film is a time traveler's glimpse of a joyous city on the brink of disaster. Our trip into the past begins on a San Francisco streetcar built in 1895.
It still comes out once in a while and carries passengers down the main street. It looks just like a cable car because it was built by the people who built the cable cars.
Our tour guide is Rick Laubscher of the Market Street Railway, a nonprofit group that keeps the city's vintage trolleys rolling.
This is the main artery of San Francisco and always has been.
Market Street is 3 miles long, 120 feet wide. The beating heart of the city since the days of the gold rush.
This is where the original film started, right here about 8th Street.
Right here is where the past comes alive, thanks to a camera mounted on the front of a cable car a century ago, catching glimpses of fashion, faces, and the helter-skelter of city traffic, horses, trolley cars, and that new devil's own invention, the motor car.
You can see when people turn to look at the camera, it was really the shock of the new. Can you imagine? Here comes this contraption down the street with these guys hand-cranking this camera furiously.
Others had made films of San Francisco starting in the 1890s. But this cameraman had the good sense to simply turn it on and leave it on. When you saw that film, what did you make of the people, the newsboys, the cars, the horses, everything all happening at once right here on the track?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that people would circulate wildly, and they're just kind of wandering across the street. You have these huge drays led by teamsters with 4, sometimes 8 horses hauling along.
And it seems, watching the film, that there were absolutely no traffic rules.
It seems like it. Sort of people, it was optional to stay to the right. But, you know, it seemed to be honored in the breach. People will tell you today that Market Street is still that way.
Looking back a century from the same spot on the same street is an eerie sight. Teddy Roosevelt was president then. Life expectancy was 47 years for men, 50 for women, most of whom still couldn't vote. And no one, man, woman, or child, went out without a hat. The last few blocks of Market Street today, banks and brokers, it's Wall Street West. A century ago, the wholesale district offering coffee, tea, and spices, a time when a decent salary was $400 a year, a time reborn on film.
It's left us an astonishing record, the likes of which we rarely see. Quality.
Film archivist and historian Rick Prelinger owns the clearest of the 3 surviving copies of the film.
This is over 100 years old, but the image quality is just absolutely excellent.
How fragile is this?
Extremely.
This is a digitally restored, high-definition copy seen here for the first time on television. What is it that moves us so when we see something like this?
It's uncanny. First off, to see something that's so old, and almost an alternate universe, really. I love when the little kid is in the carriage ahead of the streetcar and opens up that curtain and peeks out. And then at the very, very end, the streetcar turns around and you have a glimpse of newsboys looking at the camera and waving just for a few frames. It dazzles audiences. People applaud this film.
It ends here, at the Ferry Building on San Francisco Bay. The movie is a small gem about a much larger gem, this magnificent city on the hills. But it's more even than that. It's a mystery quite literally ripped, as they say, from the headlines of the past.
It just seemed like it was an important enough film that something must have been written about it somewhere, and why not try and figure it out? I'm like that.
David Kiehn is another movie historian, a man obsessed with unlocking the secrets of the Market Street film, who spent days, weeks, months at the San Francisco Library scanning old newspapers for clues. Judging from the state of the construction on the various buildings along the way, the Library of Congress had dated the film to September of 1905. Screening it over and over, Kiehn wasn't so sure.
There's some water between the tracks there,
Yes.
reflection.
The film showed puddles from a recent rain, but the San Francisco newspapers from September 1905 showed no rain at all.
Clear, zero precipitation.
More clues came from the surprising number of cars. There were only a few thousand of them in the whole country in those days, and it appears the drivers on Market Street were recruited to fill up the screen, circling round the camera to make the city look more lively. Was that one of the cars registrations
Yes,
you were
that's,
able to identify?
J. Barry Anway, who was a chauffeur at this time.
Kiehn checked old car licenses and registration records and discovered the chauffeur's car, number 4867, was registered in January 1906. Another one, number 5057, registered in February of 1906, suggesting the film was made some time after that. Kiehn went back to the 1906 newspapers and found,
Starting around mid-March and going to the end of the month, there was quite a bit of rain.
enough to account for the puddles and to push the likely time the film was made into April 1906. On April 18, 1906, as depicted in this painting, the great San Francisco earthquake struck. It and the subsequent fire killed thousands. Was there a eureka moment when you say, aha, it was not 1905, it was spring of 1906?
Well, certainly seeing the New York Clipper articles, that was I think, the defining moment. Dramatic vaudeville circus.
The New York Clipper was a showbiz paper where actors, jugglers, songwriters, and movie makers advertised their wares, and where Kiehn found a series of ads from the Miles brothers, filmmakers offering movie houses a travelogue called A Trip Through Market Street. This ad from April 28, 1906, 10 days after the quake.
We have the only pictures of any value ever made in San Francisco. Before the frightful catastrophe.
This strongly suggests the film was made just before the earthquake.
Yeah, well, it actually spells it out exactly right here. This film was made just 1 week before the complete destruction of every building shown in the picture.
New research this summer confirmed that. Kiehn had stripped away the haze of history to show us the real story behind the trip through Market Street. San Francisco closing in on its rendezvous with catastrophe. The odds are some of the people you see had just days to live. When you look at that film, all you can think of is what was about to happen.
It takes on a power that is almost inconceivable, because you can look at the buildings and know with certainty that almost all disappeared. You can look at the people on the street and wonder who survived. You're watching a shade fall over an era.
This is Market Street after the quake and fire. Among the buildings destroyed, the offices of the Miles brothers. Their film of San Francisco in happier days barely survived. They'd shipped it to New York by train just the night before the quake.
Knowing that it was our relatives that did that, we were very proud.
Scott Miles and his uncle Dwayne are descendants of Earl Miles, the man who supervised the filming. They have one of his cameras and a family album of still pictures the Miles brothers took of the damage and the city's refugees. But they never knew the Miles brothers made the Market Street film until David Kiehn uncovered the story.
David Kiehn just produced so much wonderful information for us, and we're astounded.
What is it about the trip down Market Street? Why do you think people are so moved by it?
I just see the people there, and they don't know what's about to hit them. And you can't help but feel for them.
Yeah, it's just how vulnerable we are.
As for the man who figured it all out, he was armed only with a computer, the internet, and an incurable curiosity.
Here's some film that we found up in the projection booth in the...
Kiehn understands well the strange power of images from the past. In the California town of Niles, a throwback itself to a gentler age, Kiehn runs a theater devoted to silent films. Charlie Chaplin himself made movies in Niles and watched them in this very room, where this night, the film to which David Kiehn gave new meaning, A Trip Through Market Street, is the star attraction.
That's the beauty of film. It captures something that nobody today is seeing anymore. It makes a connection. Young and old, they still react with amazement to it.
And 30 miles across San Francisco Bay, the ferry building still welcomes travelers. And Market Street, a century later, rolls on and on.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to take a journey back in time and see the whole film, A Trip Down Market Street, sponsored by Pfizer.